Hi, and welcome to Framework for Success. I am Michelle Egbert. Well, at the beginning of the year, I was focused on visibility. I wanted more speaking opportunities. I wanted more people to actually hear my message. And I also wanted more opportunities to share with people what I do. By mid year, though, those opportunities were finally starting to show up for me. But during a mid year review, I realized something that was surprising. Visibility was no longer my biggest challenge. I still needed it. It just wasn't one of my biggest challenge because growth now was. And if I hadn't stopped to evaluate where I was, I would have spent the next 6 months solving the wrong problem. And that's why I believe a mid year check in is one of the most important things that you can do. And not just for yourself, personally and professionally, but also for yourself professionally within your business. And it's not because you need to judge your progress mid year. It's helpful, but that's not all of it. It's also because you need to evaluate your alignment. Are you still in alignment with where you are going? So today I want to walk you through why a mid-year check-in matters and the questions that I believe every entrepreneur should ask themselves before moving into that second half of the year. So why? Why does a mid-year check-in, why does it truly matter for you? Well, many people, they are going to wait until December, beginning of December, to really evaluate their year. Well, now they only have 30 days to course correct because by then the year is almost over. But a mid year check in, well, it actually gives you something incredibly valuable. It gives you way more time to adjust. It gives you 6 months, in fact. So think of it like driving across the country. If you are 1 degree off course when you leave, you may not even notice it immediately. But 6 months into your journey, 6 months later, well, you can end up somewhere completely different than where you intended to go. Well, that's the same. That's the same thing that can happen in your business and also can happen in your personal life. So small shifts, well, they become significant over time. And a mid year review, well, it's going to help you do a few things. It's going to help you reconnect to your vision, to your why. It's going to help you refocus your priorities. And of course, celebrate the progress you've done so far. But identify what's no longer working for you and to make intentional adjustments before another 6 months passes you by. And this isn't about perfection. This is actually more about awareness of where you are and where you're going because you can't change what you don't evaluate. So here's one of the questions you can ask yourself. What has actually gone well this year? And the reason I say that is because most people actually start in a mid-year by focusing on what they haven't accomplished so far. And I think that's a mistake. I think you need to focus on the positive and what you've accomplished. Because you can ask yourself questions like, what am I proud of? What progress have I actually made so far? But also, what challenges did I overcome in these past 6 months? And what have I learned from them? And what growth have I actually experienced over the last 6 months? Because sometimes we become so focused on the destination that we fail to acknowledge how far we've actually come already. And that's what a mid-year check-in does for you. Because that progress, well, it does deserve recognition. And it's not because it feeds your ego, not at all. It's because it will actually build some confidence for what's coming next in the next 6 months. So you should celebrate those wins, even the small ones at that 6 month check in, especially those small ones. So, second question you can ask yourself at the check in is, what is truly draining my energy right now? Because this may be one of those most important questions you can ask yourself at that mid year check in, because you need to acknowledge what's actually draining your energy right now, because it could be those commitments that no longer fit where you are going. It could be a process that isn't working for you anymore. It also could be a relationship that is creating constant tension in your life and in your business. It also can be an unrealistic expectation that you have placed on yourself. Because the reality is that burnout, rarely happens overnight. It usually happens through those repeated misalignment actions that you take. So when something consistently drains your energy and it doesn't produce those meaningful results, well, it does deserve your attention so you can acknowledge that. Because not everything that is good is actually necessary in your life or your business. And not everything that is necessary in your life or business should continue forever. So, third question you can ask yourself at that check in is, am I focused on the right priorities? Or do they need to change? Because one of my favorite reminders is this: if everything in your life and business is important, then nothing is. Because the middle of the year, well, this is the perfect time to ask those questions about what truly matters in this season that I'm in. We've talked about this before. Where am I spending most of my time? Does my calendar actually reflect the priorities that I set out to do? And am I reacting to demands or am I leading intentionally? Many entrepreneurs, they are incredibly busy, but being busy and productive are not the same thing. And being productive and being in alignment with where you're going are also not the same thing. Because the goal here is not simply to do more. The goal is to focus on what truly matters most right now in your life. So the fourth question is, has what I needed in this season actually changed? Now, if you followed me for any, length of time, you have probably heard me talk about identifying the season that you're in. And there's a lot of videos out there right now of identifying the season you're in. And I believe that that still matters, even at the mid-year check-in. But at a mid-year, I think there's a slightly different question that we should ask ourselves. And that question becomes, has what I needed in this season actually changed? I mentioned before, at the beginning of this year, I knew my focus needed to be visibility. I had a message that I wanted to share. I wanted to speak more. I wanted to get in front of those new audiences. And I wanted people to know who I was and what I actually stood for. So at the beginning of the year, visibility became that strategy, and it worked, as I mentioned before. But as the months went on in this year, more opportunities really started showing up. More conversations were happening. I was having more connections with people, true connections with people, and more people interested in my work. But when I actually sat down for a mid-year review, I realized something very important, that the challenge was no longer visibility. The challenge now is growth. I had mentioned that in the beginning. Now, I had spent so much time focused on getting in front of people that I hadn't spent enough time actually preparing for what would happen when, they actually found me. So things that needed to happen, my website, it needed refinement. My systems, they needed some improvements. And my offers, well, they needed a little more structure. And my follow-up processes, well, they needed my attention. Now, visibility, well, that was opening the doors for me. But growth, well, growth was what would also allow me to walk through those doors. And that's when I realized something big. At a mid-year review, well, it isn't about, changing directions. Sometimes that mid-year review is about actually recognizing that your next level requires a different strategy than the one that you actually start off at the beginning of the year that actually got you here at mid-year. I still need visibility, but now I also need growth. I need stronger foundations to support the opportunities I've been working so hard to create this year. And you know what? That is why one of the most valuable questions that you can ask yourself at a mid-year check-in is, what does this season actually require from me now that it didn't require from me 6 months ago when I started this year? And why? Because success often creates new needs. And if we don't stop long enough to recognize those needs, well, we can unintentionally become that bottleneck of our own growth. We can get in our own way and become our own bottleneck. Well, another question you can ask yourself is, what needs to change before the end of the year? So that's your mid-year check-in. That's another question for you. And this is actually where reflection turns into some action. You can ask yourself, what do I need to start doing now that I haven't been doing? But also, what do I need to stop doing that I have been doing? And what do I need to continue doing to move forward? And what one change would create the biggest positive impact over the next 6 months for me, personally and professionally? Now, you don't need 20 new goals. You just need some clarity. Some small intentional changes made now can completely change the outcome for the year. So as we close today, as you move into the second half of the year, I want you to remember this. A mid-year check-in is not just a report card. It's actually a recalibration. It is an opportunity to take that much needed long pause, long enough to make sure that life in your business that you are building is still aligned with who you are and who you are becoming. And the goal, again, is not perfection. The goal is progress, to move forward to who you want to become. The goal is not doing more. It's doing what matters most in this moment to get you to the end of the year. So before you rush into the next 6 months, I want you to take some time to reflect. I do want you to celebrate what's working. I want you to release what is not working. And I want you to refocus on what truly matters. and move forward with intention. Because success is not built in one single moment. Success is built through those small adjustments that are made consistently over time. Sometimes the most powerful thing that you can do is to take a pause. Take a pause long enough to make sure that you are still headed in the direction you truly want to go. And I want to thank you for being here today, and I will see you next time.